high-stakes meeting. What it means for U.S.-Russian relations. Martial law. The Philippines considers all options as the country deals with militants allied with the Islamic State. Saving Charlie Gard. Another hospital offers help as the terminally ill boy's mother credits Pope Francis and President Trump for extending her son's life. And the Pope's idea of art.
Dio non scarta nessuna persona.
A look at a new documentary exploring how the Holy Father views painting and sculpture. On EWTN News Nightly for Friday, July 7th, 2017. Good evening and thank you for joining us for News from a Catholic Perspective. I'm Wyatt Goolsby in for Lauren Ashburn. President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin meet face-to-face for the very first time. It happened on the sidelines of the Group of 20, or G20 summit, which begins today in Hamburg, Germany. President Trump is on a hectic 4-day European visit. Correspondent Mark Irons is following his trip from the White House. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Wyatt. President Trump opened his first meeting with President Putin by raising concerns over Russian interference in the 2016 presidential election. That fulfilled demands by U.S. lawmakers in both parties. The meeting was scheduled for 35 minutes, but lasted more than 2 hours.
President Putin and I have been discussing various things, and I think it's going very well.
Presidents Trump and Putin expressing confidence their meeting will lead to positive results. Their conversation was not open to the press, but Secretary of State Rex Tillerson says the president raised concerns about Russian interference in the U.S. election. Putin denied any role. The Russian leader says they discussed terrorism and cybersecurity, as well as Ukraine and Syria, a point of contention in U.S.-Russia relations. President Trump is calling for Russia to stop supporting Bashar al-Assad's regime in Syria. Despite that tension, Trump calls the talks very good.
We look forward to a lot of very positive things happening for Russia, for the United States, and for everybody concerned.
This year's G20 host, German Chancellor Angela Merkel, says the countries represented here make up 2/3 of the world's population and 3/4 of world trade. And Pope Francis is urging G20 leaders to give absolute priority to the poor, refugees, those suffering, the displaced, and those excluded without national, racial, religious, or cultural distinction. After today's talks, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson announced the United States and Russia have struck an agreement on a ceasefire in southwest Syria set to take place July 9th. It's the first U.S.-Russian effort under Trump's presidency to stem Syria's 6-year civil war. Tillerson says it's the first indication that the U.S. and Russia are able to work together in Syria. Wyatt?
Mark, President Trump also met with the President of Mexico for the first time since taking office. How did that go?
President Trump is calling President Enrique Peña Nieto his friend, but Trump still says he will build the border wall to keep drugs and criminals out of the U.S., and he said today that he is absolutely sure he wants Mexico to pay for the wall. The Mexican president said he hopes to continue a dialogue.
We'll continue to follow those developments. Correspondent Mark Irons at the White House. Thanks, Mark. President Trump drew cheers during his trip to Poland yesterday when he spoke about Pope John Paul II. Trump recalled the day in 1979 that 1 million Poles showed up for their first Mass with the Polish Pope.
1 million Polish people did not ask for wealth. They did not ask for privilege. Instead, 1 million Poles sang 3 simple words: "We want God." Together with Pope John Paul II, the Poles reasserted their identity as a nation devoted to God.
Trump said the Mass with Pope John Paul II signaled the end of communism in the country. President Trump says he is considering some pretty severe things for North Korea after the communist country conducted a test launch of a ballistic missile on July 4th. Joining us now is Dean Chang, Senior Research Fellow at the Heritage Foundation. Dean, in Poland, Trump said the time has arrived to confront North Korea, but his Pentagon chief, Jim Mattis, says a war with North Korea would be catastrophic. What options do you think the president is considering?
I think it's always important to remember that President Trump and his Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, are both people who have a purely business background. They're not politicians. And so their first line of response is most likely going to be economic and financial. And actually, we're already starting to see a significant increase in economic pressure on North Korea. North Korea's banks have finally been removed from the international financial transaction network, the electronic links that allow business to occur. Until North Korean banks were removed a couple of months ago, we actually had more sanctions on Zimbabwe than we did on North Korea. Now, this past week, we've announced that Chinese banks that do business with North Korea are also going to be removed from the SWIFT network. So this is significant pressure on the regime in Pyongyang.
Well, the president of South Korea says he's willing to meet with Kim Jong-un, the North Korean leader. Do you think President Moon can bring stability or help bring stability to the Korean Peninsula?
Well, I think it should be sobering to consider that in both the run-up to the South Korean presidential election and since then, North Korea has done nothing to indicate that it's interested in having talks with South Korea. They have now fired an ICBM. They have fired a variety of shorter-range missiles, anti-ship missiles, all rather than trying to build support with President Moon. They've basically slapped him in the face. It's not even clear that President Moon will have anyone to meet with if the North Koreans aren't willing to meet with him. He has certainly said that he wants to pursue a more conciliatory approach.
Nikki Haley, the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, has warned China that it risks trading with the United States if China violates UN sanctions against North Korea. Do you think China is a friend or a foe when it comes to helping the U.S. with North Korea?
I don't think that China is a friend or a foe. I think China just simply looks at North Korea as totally different from how we do. We're very focused on the nuclear threat, obviously to the United States, but also to our key allies, South Korea and Japan. China isn't worried about North Korean nuclear weapons. It knows that those weapons aren't aimed at China. What it's worried about, first and foremost, is the possibility of a collapse and millions of North Korean refugees fleeing into China. After that, it's worried about the possibility of a Korean peninsula that is unified under the South that remains a U.S. ally, which would put a U.S. ally literally on China's doorstep. So the problem is that our interests and Chinese interests fundamentally diverge. So we ask the Chinese to do something, and they look at this, and it's like, what's in it for us? And the answer, to be fair to them, is nothing that matters to you.
Dean Chang, Senior Research Fellow at the Heritage Foundation, thanks so much for talking with us.
Thank you for having me.
Attorney General Jeff Sessions and his deputy Rod Rosenstein head to Guantanamo Bay in Cuba. A Justice Department spokesman says the two want an up-to-date understanding of the current operations at the detention facility. Sessions considers Guantanamo an important tool to prevent terror attacks by keeping suspects locked up. Islamic militants unleashed a suicide car bomb and heavy gunfire on an Egyptian military checkpoint. At least 23 soldiers were killed, more than 30 others were hurt. The attack happened in Al-Barth, located in the northeastern part of the Sinai Peninsula. It's the deadliest attack on Egypt's military this year. No group has claimed responsibility. However, Egypt has been battling an insurgency in recent years, mainly by ISIS groups. Filipino President Rodrigo Duterte says he'll likely extend martial law in the southern part of the country to deal with a deadly siege. The town of Marawi has been surrounded by militants linked to ISIS since May. Martial law expires in about 2 weeks, but police warned that would be dangerous. Nearly 400,000 residents have abandoned the city and nearby towns. The United States and Australia have deployed surveillance planes to help troops locate militants. Police in Paris evacuate 1,500 migrants from makeshift street camps as Europe deals with a surge of new arrivals. Officers say unauthorized camps, quote, present serious risks for the security and health of their occupants as well as neighborhood residents. French President Emmanuel Macron's government is expected to announce a set of measures to respond to the migrant crisis next week. Authorities in Italy are searching through the rubble after an apartment building collapse. 7 people are believed to be missing, including 2 children. 30 firefighters are digging in the ruins near Mount Vesuvius. The cause of the collapse remains unknown, but authorities are investigating whether it was related to renovation work in the building. 3 people, including 2 Americans, were gored today during the running of the bulls in Pamplona, Spain. A 46-year-old Spanish man was undergoing surgery for serious injuries to his head and leg after he was gored and then tossed by a bull. Hospital officials say the 35 and 29-year-old Americans weren't as badly injured. The running of the bulls takes place during the annual San Fermin Festival. It's featured in Ernest Hemingway's book, The Sun Also Rises. Vatican leaders will meet next year to study how technology is shaping the church and our society. The author of a new book is also exploring the topic. In Connected World, Father Philip Larry talks to industry's leaders about the future, from automated work to virtual wars. Father Philip Larry is also the chair of logic at the Pontifical Lateran University. He joins us now from Rome. Father, in your book, Connected World, you talk about the future of technology and how all of the changes will impact our society. Overall, is the rapid change a good thing or a bad thing?
It's inevitable, and I think as long as we continue reflecting on what's happening, it's going to be good. I'm optimistic. Some of the people interviewed in the book were less optimistic because the technology is changing at an exponential rate. But I think as humanity, we are able to control and direct it.
Well, you also mentioned that people are losing their ability to think critically, though. How so?
Sometimes we are letting the machines think for us. The digital technology that we have can become our master. And in that sense, we no longer think critically. I think from an educational point of view, that is the primary goal of especially universities, to help students think critically. That's what I try to do, and that's what all the colleagues here at the Pontifical Lateran University also do. In dealing with other people, especially in the States, I'm also comforted by the fact that many educators are already aware of these difficulties and are looking for solutions along with tech companies in order to help students continually improve their critical thinking.
How in general, though, is technology connected to our faith?
In many ways. We have, of course, the Vatican outreach using technology in order to spread the message. Not just the Vatican, but almost any part of the Catholic Church around the world, and not only Catholic Church, is using technology to spread the message. We are also beginning to focus on questions concerning the afterlife, concerning the human soul, because the technology is getting to a point where it's presenting quandaries and difficulties referring to the spiritual aspect, the spiritual side of human people. So I think that's, especially in the area of artificial intelligence, but not only, also in nanotechnology and robotics, we're beginning to approach a boundary which was before not accessible. And that is what's introducing, I think, many spiritual themes.
So many future challenges out there, as well as future opportunities. Father Philip Larry, chair of logic at the Pontifical Lateran University, thanks so much for talking with us about it.
My pleasure, thank you.
Pope Francis approves the martyrdom of 2 Colombian priests murdered because of their faith. The Holy Father recognized Bishop Jesus Jaramillo Monsalve, killed in 1989, and Father Pietro Maria Ramirez Ramos, killed in 1948, as martyrs. Pope Francis will beatify both when he visits Colombia in September. Pope Francis also signed off on a miracle attributed to the intercession of a Polish nurse. You can read more about her and other future blesseds by visiting CatholicNewsAgency.com. Coming up, the fight over a baby boy's life. Charlie Gard's case has drawn reaction from Pope Francis to President Trump. We'll talk to a pro-life leader who's speaking out. Welcome back. I'm Wyatt Goolsby in for Lauren Ashburn. The mother of Charlie Gard, a terminally ill baby in England, says the support the family's received around the world is reviving her hope. Connie Yates says Charlie isn't suffering, and it's thanks in part to the intervention of Pope Francis and President Trump that her son's time on life support has been extended. The 11-month-old was set to be taken off life support last Friday after his parents lost their final appeal to have Charlie taken to the U.S. for experimental therapy. Joining us now is Penny Nance, President and CEO of Concerned Women for America. Penny, you were among the pro-life leaders in Washington who met or had a prayer conference yesterday and press conference urging the British government basically to consider Charlie's parents in this case.
Yes.
What was your message to the British government?
Well, the nation of the UK is a sovereign nation, but we came together and humbly said, please reconsider that we have a pro-life ethic in this country, and we welcome him to our shores. Our president has made that clear, and we're standing alongside President Trump and saying, we hope there's help here. Ultimately, this is in God's hands, but they're not done fighting, and so we want to stand beside Charlie's parents and urge the government to understand that parental rights are important in this case.
A New York City hospital has offered help to Charlie Gard, either to admit the baby if they're able to get him across the pond, or if not, able to send medicine to him. Why do you think there's been such an outpouring of support for Charlie Gard in this particular case?
Well, you know, we're poised in this nation considering what we're going to do on the issue of health care. And there's many in this country who believe in a single payer system. And while, you know, there is some support for that, this is the downside. When you have a single payer system and you have the strong arm of government coming between the rights of the parents and the child, then you have nowhere else to go. So, you know, this is real. And by the way, we have those issues now. There's an independent payment advisory board that was part of Obamacare that is not done yet. We're working to quash that finally. So there's still work to do, and these end-of-life issues are not going away. It's part of a pro-life ethic to be caring for the least of these from conception to natural death, and at Concerned Women for America, we're going to do that.
Sure. Well, you mentioned the health care bill. Of course, next week the Senate is back. They're going to be taking up the health care bill, thinking about how they can change it. You were at the White House earlier this week, meeting with Vice President Pence. Do you think the Senate will take up and really consider a lot of these pro-life distinctions?
Yes, and that is what we were talking to Vice President Pence about. It's very important to us. If we are going to support this bill, we've got to make sure that there are pro-life protections. Unfortunately, there wasn't those in Obamacare, and people were forced to be entangled with the issue of abortion through their tax dollars. And so we're working on that and also shifting the funding away from Planned Parenthood, the nation's largest abortion provider, to the 13,000 community health centers in this country who help poor women but aren't involved in abortion. Their hands aren't dirtied with abortion. So we can help poor women and we can stay out of the abortion business. We've got to do that.
Very good. Penny Nance, CEO and President of Concerned Women for America. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Tonight on EWTN Pro-Life Weekly, Catherine Zeltner discusses the Charlie Gard case and gets guidance from the National Catholic Bioethics Center.
Because the means are termed extraordinary, that is, there's no moral obligation to use them, but that does not mean that there would be a moral obligation to stop using them.
Dr. Haas also gives us his take on whether the courts should be making a judgment in this case. You can hear his answer, plus see Catherine's interview with a Catholic lawyer on medical ethics. Pro-Life Weekly airs tonight at 11 p.m. Eastern on EWTN. It re-airs Sunday morning at 10. Up next, overcoming suicidal thoughts. Olympic champion Michael Phelps reveals a dark time in his life.
I just thought it was the best thing to do, is just not to be here.
And art through the eyes of Pope Francis, how it can be used to spread the gospel. Welcome back. I'm Wyatt Goolsby in for Lauren Ashburn. The governor of Missouri is broadening his call for new abortion restrictions in the state. Pro-life Governor Eric Greitens also wants to make sure any bill passed could survive potential court challenges. Last month, the governors called on lawmakers to a special legislative session to address pro-life issues. A sweeping new bill passed by Oregon lawmakers will force taxpayers to pay for abortions in their state, even though many oppose it, according to pro-life advocates in the state. Liberty Pike, Director of Communications for Oregon Right to Life, joins us via Skype from Portland, Oregon. Liberty, first, what is your reaction to this new bill?
We are just absolutely horrified. Oregon, we're kind of the wild, wild west out here as far as abortion rights. I'm sure everybody knows we have the horrible reputation of being, you know, the most pro-abortion state in the country. We have no restrictions on abortion. Abortion is legal till 9 months, until birth. You don't even have to be a licensed medical doctor. Abortion clinics are completely unregulated. It feels like the abortion rights lobby has absolutely everything that they could ever want out here. So it's just horrifying, not to mention that abortion is just wrong on all levels, but that they already have everything, and now they're passing a bill that will make it so that every insurance policy has to cover abortion with absolutely no financial responsibility for the patient.
This bill is crafted at the state level, but the Oregon health plan is partially federally funded. Do you predict or think that lawsuits will arise saying federal funds can't be used for abortions?
We're really not sure how that's going to play out. The biggest possibility that we see for lawsuits would be from insurance companies that are not allowed to enter the state market or not allowed to switch a plan from a plan that covers abortion over to a plan that is abortion free. They are the ones that would probably have the biggest case to sue against this bill.
How are insurance companies reacting to the bill?
Well, the only insurance company that seems to have a problem, that has had a problem with it, is Providence Health Plans. Providence Health Plans is a Catholic insurance company. They insure over 260,000 people in our state. They're really a huge insurance provider, and they don't cover elective abortions. And so they obviously had a huge problem with this bill and threatened to leave the state if the bill passed. But unfortunately, in the House, they were given kind of a grandfather clause that said, okay, you're allowed to keep your plans as is.
Well, there are measures in the bill that include religious-based exemptions like churches. Do you think this measure realistically will protect religious liberty and conscience rights?
Realistically, I don't. We can still keep our Providence plans, so that's good. But then there's this fund that the Oregon government has set up now, basically to pay for abortion plans for women that are on Providence plans. But if Providence were to pull out for some reason, there's no piece in the bill that requires an abortion-free option for religious organizations. And again, the religious organization that we're talking about is just churches. So people, Catholic people who are opposed to abortion, Oregon Right to Life, we are not guaranteed that we will ever be able to find an abortion-free plan if something were to happen to Providence.
Well, I know that this bill is alarming not only to Oregon pro-lifers, but to pro-lifers across the country. Liberty Pike, Director of Communications for Oregon Right to Life, thanks so much for the work that you do.
Thank you.
Olympic champion Michael Phelps admits he considered suicide. He describes a dark time in his life when he wanted to give up.
I just thought it was the best thing to do, is just not to be here. Those days when I was sitting in that, in my room where I didn't move for like 4 days, I knew I needed help and I knew I needed to change something in my life, and I was kind of in a lost place.
Phelps sought help through rehab, friends, and family. He says he rebuilt himself through weeks of treatment. Prince Harry wants to bring awareness to mental health. He visited a Leeds Children's Hospital in northern England where he met with patients and staff. The British prince also visited the home of a 5-year-old boy who suffers from a genetic disorder. Oliver Rooney is getting a new place to play thanks to a humanitarian organization. Finally tonight, a new documentary by the Vatican Museums explores the Holy Father's perspective on art.
La vita umana, la persona, non sono più sentite come valore primario da rispettare e tutelare.
Pope Francis' My Idea of Art is based on a book of the same name. The film features the Holy Father describing art as a way to spread the gospel and to rehabilitate what he calls the throwaway culture. And we thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Wyatt Goolsby. Lauren Ashburn is back here on the Anchor Desk Monday. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Good night, and God bless.